finally, after 2 years of trying to figure out what to do with the defeated South, the Confederate States, Congress came up with a plan. And, this plan was really influenced by the radical Republicans that won a majority in Congress in the elections of 1866, in the congressional elections of 1866. So you had a majority of radicals that really, really wanted to punish the South into submission, right? Punish them so badly that they cry uncle and that they would never, ever do something like this again, and to use them as an example to any future insurrection that where the groups might be talking about secession. So, the Reconstruction Act of 1867 was passed, which was very punitive on the former Confederacy, meaning very harsh, very strict. It basically divided the 10 Confederate states up, minus Tennessee, because Tennessee, as I just stated in the previous video, Tennessee had passed the 14th Amendment, basically ratified the 14th. So Congress told them any state that ratifies the 14th Amendment would be given immediate statehood, and Tennessee did it, and they were given immediate statehood. So that was left with only 10 Confederate states as opposed to 11, and they were divided into 5 military districts and controlled by a Union general. Basically, it was martial law in the former Confederacy. It required ratification of the 14th Amendment. So, had states done what Tennessee did and ratified the 14th before, they wouldn't have to go through this. The last thing, and has the most consequence of any of these, is the excluding of any Confederate general or soldier who served in the Confederacy from not only holding office, but also voting. So essentially all whites in the South were not allowed to vote or hold office, because most of the whites had served in the Confederacy in some way, shape, or form. So obviously Southerners were very upset with the terms of the Reconstruction Act of 1867. They didn't like it. It caused a lot of resentment, and that will go on for a long time. I think too, so the concept that I talked about, that had Abraham Lincoln survived and his 10% plan would have been implemented, things might be different today. With his death and then Congress taking over power, having a weak president in Johnson, Congress running the show, radicals running the show, creating a Reconstruction Act like the Act of 1867 here, the Reconstruction Act, that was very harsh and very, very strict punishment against the former Confederacy, and causing that resentment that just emanated from the South and still does. So could things have been different had Lincoln survived and his 10% plan that was based on forgiveness and forgetting and going on, had that been implemented, maybe things would be different today. Just once again, just also shows you how bad that decision was in 1864 when Abraham Lincoln dumped Harry Hamlin and added Andrew Johnson to the ticket. And he became vice president, so that wasn't very good. So anyways, here's your military districts here. You have district number 1 right up here that includes Virginia. Military district number 2, that's North Carolina and South Carolina. Military district number 3, that's Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. 4 is Mississippi and Arkansas, and 5 is Louisiana and Texas. And you see that Tennessee here is green because it's a former Confederate state, and but it doesn't have this dark green all the way around it because they were given statehood for passing the 14th or ratifying the 14th Amendment. And this political cartoon really attests to the idea that this harsh treatment of the South caused a lot of resentment. You have here African-American family, a man, a woman, and a baby, cowering because of they're being scared of these men right here. This guy's KKK on his chest. This one, it says White League. They're shaking hands, and statement worse than slavery. So yeah, that's what I've been discussing on how the post-war situation was really bad. Now, the three Reconstruction Amendments you should all know. Everybody should know this, definitely. The 13th Amendment was freedom for slaves. The 14th Amendment that we've been discussing was really at its heart citizenship for African American men. Now it defines citizenship is what it is. And then the 15th Amendment, voting rights for African American men. The group that was really disappointed with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments because there was no mention of women in any of them was women's suffrage advocates. Women wanted suffrage at this point. They say it's been too long, and this is 1860s. They will have to wait an even much longer time. The women don't get the right to vote till 1920, so still a long way away. So over 60 years away after the war is when they're almost 60 years when they get the right to vote. African Americans politically were on the rise temporarily. I like to use the analogy again for the second time in history is that there's a window in time. If you remember the last time I used the analogy, the window in time theory was westward movement, the rise of the common man, because common men were the ones moving out west, and the western states outnumbered the eastern states, so the power shifted. Temporarily here during Reconstruction, African Americans were allowed to run and win, and many of them won, like Blanche K. Bruce and Hiram Revels, the first two African American congressmen. The reason they were able to win is because of the Reconstruction Act of 1867 that didn't allow, for the most part, whites in the South to vote. And after the 15th Amendment passed, really, the only ones voting in the South are African Americans and the military that was down there. No one else was voting. So it allowed for the rise of these African American men in politics, in Congress. And it's a window in time. Reconstruction is going to end, and that window is going to close, just as I explained the window closed, for the common man too. Two groups that were hated by Southerners were carpetbaggers and scalawags. A carpetbagger was a Northerner who wanted to take advantage of political or economic opportunity and would move down to the South. Like some examples. Maybe someone's involved in construction and knew that in the South, cities were going to have to be reconstructed. So they went and packed all their belongings, went down to the South and worked and rebuilt some of those cities. Another example would be a politician who couldn't win an election in the North and goes down to the South and wins a political position. Southerners hated Northerners that moved down into the South. They called them carpetbaggers. You will sometimes hear that term used today for people that move down from the North, which is very common now to get away from colder weather and higher taxes and move down into the South. So some of those southern states will call them carpetbaggers, and it's related to this term right here that was used post-Civil War. Scalawags were white Southerners who did not support the Confederacy. There were some of those around. A scalawag would be able to vote because they didn't serve in the Confederacy. Southerners that couldn't vote and did serve in the Confederacy called them traitors, and they didn't like them, and they called them scalawags. So two terms that came up post-war. Okay, let's talk about the impeachment of Johnson. Andrew Johnson will become the first United States president to be impeached. Now remember, and we should know this now because we're going through an impeachment trial currently as I'm going through this video right now. President Trump is being impeached for the second time. There's been 3 presidents that have been impeached. Johnson was the first, Clinton was the second, Trump was the third, and Trump is being impeached right now, has been impeached. To be impeached, as you know, does not mean to be removed from office. We have never had a president that has been removed from office through impeachment. They go through a trial, and if they're guilty in that trial, then they would be removed from office. The closest we have come was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon resign before he was impeached, but most believe that if he would have been impeached, there would have been a trial, he would have been guilty, and he would have been removed from office. But he resigned before all that could happen. So he doesn't even go down as a president who has been impeached. So Johnson was impeached for violating a law that was passed because Congress knew that he would violate it. Did they set up the president to be impeached? The answer is 100% yes. Did President Johnson know that he was being set up to be impeached? Yes. Did he go and violate the 10-year of office act knowing that he would be impeached? Yes, he did. Is it a pissing match between Congress and the president? Yes, it is. They're going back and forth. The 10-year of office act was an act that was passed by a Republican-controlled Congress that stated that the president had to have Senate approval before he could remove one of his secretaries in his cabinet. Remember, the cabinet members are put in place so as a president's, like what I called assistant coaches, right? The guys that could come and help him out, the people that, like for instance, Edwin Stanton was the Secretary of War under Johnson. Johnson didn't like Edwin Stanton because Stanton was a Lincoln guy, and Stanton was also spying on Johnson and then reporting back to the radical Republicans what Johnson was saying. So Johnson wanted him removed. Congress didn't want him removed because he was giving them valuable information. So they passed this law, the 10-year of office act, that stated a president needed to have Senate approval before he could get rid of one of his secretaries. Johnson, within hours of this law passing, Johnson said, I'm going to violate it. And he fired Edwin Stanton. Once again, remember, they're in a pissing match. Congress, the House, within hours of Stanton being removed, passed articles of impeachment, which said that the president committed high crimes and misdemeanors. And then there was a Senate. Within weeks, there was a trial in the Senate, and the senators were the jury, and they heard the case, and it all came down to one last senator who could vote either way. If he voted guilty, then Johnson was out. If he voted not guilty, then Johnson would be able to stay. And the senator decided that, that probably wasn't the right thing to do, that Johnson probably hadn't committed a high crime or misdemeanor, and he voted not guilty, and Johnson was able to finish his time as president, and which wasn't very long. It was a matter of months. But he was basically powerless before this, and he was even more powerless after. But he was able to finish his term as president. Johnson did. And there's a sketch of the trial. This is Andrew Johnson right there on trial in the Senate. The senators are all the jury. And there's a political cartoon attesting to the impeachment of Johnson. Okay, so during this time period, 1867, the one, I guess, crowning achievement of the Johnson administration would be the purchase of Alaska. Secretary of State William Seward came to Johnson and said, we need to purchase this from Alaska. And the United States decided to do that. So it was actually Russia that came to the United States and pleaded with them to buy Alaska because they were in debt and needed money. And they put a price tag of $7.2 million. And a lot of people were like, why in the heck would we want to buy Alaska? It's nothing but a big old block of ice, which it really isn't. But that's what people's perception of it was. See, William Seward took a lot of heat for this. It was known as Seward's refrigerator or Seward's folly. However, in the end, it ends up being a very good purchase because of all the resources that have come out of Alaska. It's a very valuable state to us currently, and pretty much has always been, whether it be oil, whether it be gold, whether it be salmon, tourism. It's been big, and big, literally and figuratively. Literally, because you see that how big Alaska is compared to the rest of the United States. It's the largest state by area. Not even close. Texas is second, but it's not even close. It's huge, but it also has the smallest population. There's a gold mining up in the Klondike area. The other thing that's come out of Alaska is oil. And this pipeline that was built all the way from the top, Prudhoe Bay, down to the port of Valdez. This is one big long pipeline that they pipe oil down here to the port of Valdez, and big oil tankers come and pick up the oil. It's an 800-mile pipe. And there was a lot of controversy in the 70s when they built this that, oh, there's going to be ecological disasters when the oil is leaks, or there's been very little of that. It has always provided a lot of money. People who live in Alaska do not pay state income tax. As a matter of fact, Alaska pays people to live there, and the money from the proceeds that come from the oil that come out of the pipeline is able to pay that. That people get paid over $1,000 a year just to live in Alaska. And it's not all ice and snow, depends on the time of year. This is what one of the controversies in the 70s was, we can't lay this huge pipeline down on the ground because of the migrating animals that move from place to place for survival. So they put it up on stilts like that, so that it doesn't interfere with the movement of animals. And then obviously salmon comes out of there. Okay, let's talk about the fate of Reconstruction. It's mixed, definitely mixed. Many Southerners regarded Reconstruction as worse than the war itself. There was a lot of cheating, lying, stealing that went on during Reconstruction, and worst of all was the anger, resentment that came out of Reconstruction in the South. So we'll continue to talk about this, but Jim Crow laws, separate but equal, came out of Reconstruction. When Reconstruction was over, it came back with a fury. So we'll be talking about that, and that's the end of chapter 22.